early afternoon to our colleagues east of us. I'm Frank Harris III, and I'm happy to begin us in this webinar on designing and implementing early alert systems to support the success of men of color. I'm also joined by several of my colleagues here in the Minority Male Community College Collaborative, our co-director, Dr. J. Luke Wood, our graduate research assistant, Melissa Vang, uh, another graduate assistant of ours who recently completed a newly minted Dr. Angelica Palacios. And then we're also have a pleasure and honor to be joined by Diva C. Ward from Kenyatta College, who leads student success efforts at Kenyatta College, who's going to share some of her insights that she has emerged from her work in leading an early alert process at her college. Before we delve into the actual content related to early alerts, we have some, as usual, with our webinars, we have some things we'd like to share. For those who are new and are joining us for the first time on an M2C3 webinar, understand that we're a research and practice center that focuses our efforts on improving student success outcomes for men of color in community colleges. By men of color, we're referring specifically to men who've been historically underserved in education, principally African American, Latino, Southeast Asian, Pacific Islander, and Native American men. We're engaged both in the scholarship related to this, as well as a range of practice efforts, this webinar being one of them. We also host a national consortium that's comprised of about 70 colleges across the country who come together to share insights, to participate in this webinar series. We have information sharing sessions where we invite members of the consortium to talk concretely about practices that they've enacted, and are really trying to make sure that we are engaged in this work in a very intentional but as broad a manner as possible. We also have the opportunity for colleges that would like to partner with us through our institutional assessment package. We are enrolling colleges now through the fall of 2016. And the package really comprised of two inquiry tools that we've developed that have emerged from the work that we've done here at M2C3. The Community College Success Measure, which is our student survey that focuses on campus climate issues. We also have the Community College Success Inventory, which is an institutional self-assessment tool that colleges use to assess their readiness to engage in efforts and sort of assess their capacity as a college to engage in efforts to facilitate student success for men of color. And then our Community College Instructional Development Inventory, which is a faculty survey that enables us to gather insights from faculty and identify areas where faculty might need some additional support with regard to building their capacity to effectively serve men of color, particularly in the teaching and learning context. We also, through another organization that we're involved in, the Center for Organizational Responsibility and Advancement, we call it CORA. We have an online certificate program that focuses specifically on teaching men of color in community colleges. It's completely online, and it's designed to where educators can participate and do it at a time that's convenient for them. The only synchronous activities that are involved in this is on Wednesday and Friday of each week that the course runs, there's a live chat with me and or Dr. Wood, and that takes place on Wednesdays at 4 p.m. and Fridays at 4 p.m. Pacific time, where you can log on. We just really cover some of the key content from the course, as well as take questions that colleagues may have about practices that they can enact or things that they can do to better support the men of color. And you can see the course targets a range of intervention areas that we know are critical for faculty who are working with these students. There's also a pre-test and a post-test, pre-test at the beginning of the course and a post-test at the end. So we have a real good sense of what the learning gains are from the course. So if this is something that you're interested in, by all means, please take a look at the website, coralearning.org. And then, of course, we invite everyone to be actively engaged on social media. Twitter and Instagram are the mediums that we would encourage you all to use. In both cases, please use the hashtag M2C3, and then you see our respective Twitter handles are here presented on the slide as well. So post questions. If you're joining the webinar with a group of colleagues, we love to see pictures. Um, so please just use this as an opportunity to connect with us via social media, not only during the webinar, but at any time for that matter. We also have to acknowledge our affiliate partners of M2C3, that being Achieving the Dream, the Association of Community College Trustees, the African American Male Education Network and Development Organization, the Community College League of California, ACPA, College Student Educators International, and the National Association of Diversity Officers of Higher Education. There are critical partners in being able to host this consortium to and really do a great job of providing us with great insights on topics and ways in which we can be a resource for our colleges who look to participate in the webinars and be a part of the consortium as well. So thank you for your support. We also have an advisory board that's comprised of educators across the country, again, who are committed to student equity and student success. So we thank them for their work as well in supporting us. And as a part of the consortium, we'd like to remind you all that our second consortium working group meeting will take place June 9th and 10th at San Diego State. We encourage you all to, if you're planning to participate, to please log on to the website, m2c3.org, and register as soon as possible. We also have an opportunity for students to participate. So if you have students that you would like to bring with you, by all means, please do so. And we're very excited to announce that we have two outstanding keynote speakers for the working group meeting this year. Dr. Estella Ben-Simone, who's a professor of urban education and director of the Center for Urban Education at the University of Southern California, will be our opening keynote speaker. And Dr. Victor Sines, who's an associate professor at the University of Texas at Austin and director of Project Males, is going to be our closing keynote speaker. So we are thrilled to have both of these esteemed colleagues to be to both open and close the keynote. So open and close the working group meeting. So by all means, please register, bring colleagues, bring students. And if you're curious as to what are some of the topics that we're going to cover during the working group meeting, there's going to be breakout sessions, lots of workshops and things like that. And then we're very intentional about making sure that we're covering some critical topics and issues that have emerged both through our research, as well as the conversations that we've had on campuses over the past year since the last working group meeting. So issues pertaining to how do you gain institutional buy-in to support efforts to serve men of color, students who are how do you support and serve students who are re-entering after having been formerly incarcerated. How do we work with students, particularly in San Diego and in California and perhaps Texas, who live a transborder lifestyle, who are sort of, perhaps living and attending school, say in California, but are also living in Mexico. And how do we help students provide and access and secure for the financial aid resources they need relative to unique circumstances they may have. Food insecurities and homelessness or unstable living is another topic that we're going to cover. How do we secure grants and do the fundraising that we need to get the resources to sustain these efforts? How do we support student athletes, male student athletes of color? How do we address racial microaggressions that occur both inside of the classroom and outside of the classroom? And then also being very intentional about having conversations about the unique experiences of men who identify as Southeast Asian, which is, again, a population that is often left out of the conversation on community college men of color. But we know, based on the outcome data that we see, that there's a real need to better support these students. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Wood, who's going to pick up on the early alert content. And again, thank you all for your participation.
Thank you, Dr. Harris, and good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure to be joining you today on this webinar on this really important topic. I want to first begin with a quote that you've regularly seen us use, but we felt that given the content of today's webinar that was very appropriate to reemphasize this point. A quote from W. Edward Deming and Paul Batalden, which says that every system is perfectly designed to achieve the results it gets. Every system is perfectly designed to achieve the results it gets. When you've heard us talk about this quote before, often we're talking about the teaching and learning experiences that take place in the classroom and how faculty members have to start thinking of their classrooms as systems. We've also talked about the role that institutional responsibility has for student success. But today's topic is on early alert systems, a strategy that campuses can use to systematically intervene when students are on the margins. We think it's important to recognize that this is a strategy that demonstrates institutional responsibility and can be very influential in increasing outcome rates and retention rates for students who are experiencing challenges, both those external to the campus and those that may occur within. So what is an early alert? Here's a definition from Gateway College in Arizona that we thought was a really good way of kind of painting an understanding of early alert. Early alert program is to improve students' persistence and promote the development of cognitive and affective skills. The system allows faculty to be proactive, supportive, and involved in facilitating the academic components of student retention through early detection and intervention of students who are experiencing problems that affect academic performance. Now, one of the things that we wanted to do is clarify two different concepts and two different systems that have often been conflated in both practice and in the scholarly literature on early alerts. You'll sometimes hear people use the term early alert and sometimes hear people use the term early warning. Early alert and early warning are actually two different concepts that are sometimes used interchangeably, but they actually are somewhat distinct. So an early warning system is when you have a system set up in place to identify students upon entry into the institution based upon some sort of pre-assessment that takes place that then uses that information to triage students to different types of support programs and services. So maybe you identify that some students are really ready to be able to engage in the college level climate, and they are provided with very little resources or additional resources, whereas you might identify students with successfully more needs that can then be referred to programs and services that can provide intrusive support to them. In fact, we know of a colleague whose name is Lee Hampton, who has been working on developing a system, an early warning actually instrument to help identify students who fall into some of those early warning categories. Early alert is after a student is already on campus, they're already taking classes, and it's a system used to identify them when problems occur and use that information to essentially refer them to additional supports and resources after they're already on campus. Now, obviously, the only real difference in the terms early warning and early alert is the time in which it takes place. Early warning being for entry into a college, and early alert after students have already been enrolled in classes. So you can see how the terms could easily be conflated, since the purpose of them is to do essentially the same thing. The other thing that we want to note is that there are different types of early alerts, and we're going to distinguish between the two as we go through this presentation. One, you have early alerts that occur at the program level. Oftentimes you'll see retention programs or categorical programs or other programs that are designed to serve specific student populations, even athletics, where students engage in some sort of form that faculty complete that's used to essentially identify whether they're in need of additional support and resources. There are also meta-level programs that are early alert, which either serve an entire college, which serve maybe a specific discipline or a specific area, such as developmental education or basic skills. And those programs are typically more systematic in terms of the approach and more technologically driven in terms of the modality in which the alert is actually activated. So let's talk about some of the benefits of early alert. So when we have a student in a class and we know that something is taking place based upon either their performance, their attendance, their level of engagement, and we know that there's a need to intervene, why is it important to have a system that does so, that then refers them to additional supports and resources on campus? We believe that early alerts communicates an institutional commitment to students, particularly those students who have been historically underrepresented and underserved. We also know that it can help to address some common barriers to student success. At some point in this presentation, we'll show you some of the recommended predictors or components that should be part of an early alert system, such as a student showing up to class late or leaving class early or turning in assignments that are somewhat incomplete. So we know that there are common barriers that have been identified both in the research literature and by practitioners that we can then use to inform when and how we intervene with students. Early alert also represents an intrusive practice. It is intrusive in that we are removing the need for the student to have to recognize that there may be a challenge, and we are intervening proactively with different people, faculty, counselors, academic advisors, who are providing students with intrusive support and resources to help remove some of the challenges that they may be facing. So let's say, for example, that a student has been having challenges at work. And as a result, they had to transition to a new employment opportunity. And we'll talk about how that might be common in a few moments. Well, it may be in a transitioning to a new employment opportunity that has shifted their schedule and has made it so it's difficult for them to be able to continue in the course that they have. Some students may still, not wanting to seek out help, try to push through and still engage in the schedule that they have, or try to approach their time management in the same way that they were before. Well, what early alert does is it identifies some predictor signs of that student who might be starting to have not the same level of success as they were before, and it can then intervene. And then maybe what occurs is that after an intervention, it's recommended that this student needs to go to career counseling or career advising because we need to help them find maybe a more suitable job option. Or we need to have them meet with an academic advisor or counselor who can help them renegotiate the schedule that they have in place. So it represents an intrusive practice that removes the need for the student to have to feel like they need to ask for help. It identifies and intervenes when challenges before they worsen. Oftentimes, one of the things that we know is that we will have students in our classes and we'll know that something is taking place. We'll know that they're starting to withdraw. We'll see warning signs of a student who is starting to underperform. And oftentimes, we hear from colleagues and we hear from many of the faculty that we do work with that the student will have left and they'll wish that they had the chance to talk with them, or they had the chance to intervene. An early alert system allows you to intervene with the student as those challenges are taking place before it's too late, because it's much harder to have a student who has already made a determination to drop a class or to fully disengage to re-engage them than it is to engage a student or encourage them not to drop a class once you know that there's some warning signs that are taking place. So we believe in early intervention. It also represents a universal practice that has intensified benefits for men of color. So we know that many of the strategies that have been recommended by M2C3, such as universal professional development for faculty and staff, such as early alert systems, a lot of the recommendations we have are things that benefit all students but have an intensified benefit for men of color. Now, we believe that it's important to make that point, but we also believe that we need to be engaged in interventions that are also not solely motivated by the fact that it benefits everyone. Sometimes we do need to be even more intentional. But this is a practice that does have benefits for all students, but of course, an intensified benefit for men of color. So how does this relate to men of color, right? Early alert and early alert systems. Well, in the scholarly literature, we know that implementing an early alert system is one of the number one recommendations that has been extended by scholars. To date, there's probably 65 to 70 peer-reviewed articles that have been written on community college men of color. And the majority of these pieces that have recommendations for practice recommend early alert. And so we know that it's something that's very important for student success. In addition, it addresses barriers that occur at the intersection of academic and environmental factors. So academic factors are those things that occur inside of college, particularly those things that occur inside the classroom. And environmental factors refer to those things that occur outside of college that influence students' success inside of college. And we'll give some of those examples to you on the next slide. In addition, we know that when we're talking about men of color, that there's oftentimes an apprehension and anxiety associated with seeking help. We have talked about this extensively in the webinar that we did on masculinity, noting that some men are apprehensive or seeking out help for fear that it will essentially make them be perceived as weak or inferior. We also know that when we're talking about students of color, that there can be an apprehension for help seeking because of this notion and stereotype that exists that students of color are academically inferior. And when we put those two identities together, both the racial identity and both the masculine identity, we can see the really important point of engaging in intrusive practices such as early alert. Now, furthermore, we know that inside the classroom, many men of color experience campus climates and campus classrooms as being hostile, marginalizing, and microaggressive. In fact, our previous webinar focused extensively on what those microaggressions look like for these men. Sometimes an early alert system can help identify a challenge that the student is experiencing. And you know what? If it occurs early enough on, maybe it is really a lack of alignment between the student and the faculty, and there's a need to put the student into a different learning context. We also know that early alert can help intervene when there are external challenges that are being experienced by men of color. Oftentimes, external challenges can manifest themselves inside the classroom. When a student experiences stress in their lives, when they experience turmoil, when they're experiencing hardship, that is naturally manifested in the classroom environment in terms of their engagement, in terms of their ability to focus on their academic matters, in terms of their authentic interest in what they're learning. So we know that with men of color, they oftentimes are having serious challenges with stable living. In fact, we have been collecting some new data that has shown that approximately 69% of the Black males in our samples report that they have challenges with stable living conditions, whether that is that they're renting and they're concerned about being able to continue to do that, whether they're couch surfing, or whether they are actually dealing with challenges with homelessness. We also know that transportation is a concern. We regularly talked about that in previous webinars, noting that many men of color take 2, 3, 4 buses just to get to campus, or take trains, or are walking. And so transportation is a concern. We know about the food insecurities, not having stable food resources. These are things that can, of course, manifest itself in the classroom, because when you haven't eaten, it's very hard to focus. We've talked extensively in previous webinars about work stability issues in terms of the common conditions of work environments for men of color, noting that they're in jobs that are physically demanding, that occur late at night, and are often transitory in nature, and numerous other stressful life events that make having an early alert system very important for this population. So let's talk about some of the challenges with early alert that sometimes influence whether campuses want to fully invest in it. Because a lot of times we'll go to campuses and we'll find out that they have early alert systems, but only for specific programs, but there's not necessarily a campus-wide early alert system. And sometimes we find that educators themselves are apprehensive about buying into an idea of doing an early alert. And here are some of the common challenges that we have heard in our experience. One, sometimes faculty are concerned that they're going to, by engaging in an early alert system, be calling out or punishing students. We think that that is a concern that can be alleviated by kind of the messaging in terms of the actual implementation planning for an early alert. Sometimes there's a concern that students will perceive faculty who use it as bad, and faculty are concerned about how that may affect how students perceive them, but also even their course evaluations. That An early alert system can discourage students rather than encouraging them because of the nature of the kind of messaging that takes place. And so we have some recommendations about the kind of messages that need to be sent to students in terms of the intervention. That it will be used to make judgments about faculty teaching, such as and reflection of their performance. That we've also heard concerns that it can restrict academic freedom. And one of the things that we know is that with early alert, and we'll show this to you later on, you have to actually have milestones that occur early enough in a class to be able to identify that a student is experiencing a challenge. So a typical class structure where you have a midterm and a final is not sufficient in order to be able to employ an early alert standard. So some faculty are concerned that it will restrict their academic freedom. We've also heard concerns about violations of collective bargaining, and that it embodies practices that are simply not the responsibility of faculty, that there's an expectations that students who come to college are college level students. And you know what? If they're college level students, we shouldn't have to intervene. If they need help, they need to find the help on their own. These are common challenges that we hear, and we think that many of these challenges are really a manifestation of erroneous assumptions and also misapplications of early alerts. And we think that there's some common ways to avoid these challenges, as well as the concerns that faculty members may have about implementing an early alert. Okay, so let's talk about some of the challenges that oftentimes occur with early alert. Now, as part of the work of M2C3, we've had the chance and opportunity and privilege of partnering with over 100 colleges across the country. Many of these colleges have told us that, yeah, we have an early alert, and there is numerous reasons why they are either concerned with the current early alert system or the system isn't being used. And so let's talk about what that looks like, because we think this is really important, because if you're going to set up early alert, we need to think about how we can make sure that people actually use it. So here's some challenges to use. One is a concern that the early alert does not occur early. We have went to many campuses where there is an early alert system, and the alert itself doesn't happen until halfway through the academic semester. So let's say a 16-week semester, the early alert doesn't occur till week 8. And the challenge with this is that if you have an alert that's taking place at that point in the semester, there's no time for real intervention to occur. There's no time to do anything other than release a student or have a student drop a class. And so you may have heard us say before that if the alert happens halfway through the semester, you don't have an early alert system, you have an early drop system or early withdrawal system. Another concern is that an early alert system is created by a small group or one department. Sometimes early alert is championed by counselors, academic advisors, counseling faculty, or by a specific academic department such as mathematics or English. When it occurs in isolation, there are oftentimes challenges in translating the early alert practices and the actually early alert structure to other areas. There's also concerns with the fact that there's a need to have buy-in in terms of the process in and of itself. So we've heard campuses who have really great sophisticated early alert systems, but faculty refuse to use it because it was created by a specific area and it wasn't done through a very collaborative process. Another challenge that we commonly hear is that no one is sure where the alert actually goes. An early alert takes place, a message is sent, and it goes into a black box. And faculty oftentimes say, I refuse to use it because I don't even know what's happening. And sometimes we've actually been to campuses where it's been admitted that actually the system is broken and the alert actually isn't going anywhere, which is one of the other points on the slide. One thing that we hear is that faculty members are apprehensive about using early alert because there's no feedback. The loop isn't closed. When a faculty member triggers an early alert, if there's not a system in place to say, hey, we met with this student, we can't necessarily tell you what occurred, but just know that we are working on it. If that doesn't take place, a faculty member might be apprehensive about using alert to begin with. Another concern that we hear is that there's no training on how to use the early alert, or that there is training, but because it's not done in a way that is intrusive, that a lot of people just don't actually know how to use the system and maybe would like to, but don't know how. We also hear that an early alert system may be too labor intensive for faculty. And so we think that that has to be one of the factors in determining whether you're going to use a software or kind of a homegrown program to do an early alert. And the other thing that we hear is that the early alert itself may not be user friendly. It may not be easy for faculty members to use it. It may require extra steps. And so we have recommendations around that as well. Okay, so let's talk about let's say that you're a campus and that you're getting ready to actually engage in implementing an early alert program. Or let's even say that you're a campus and you've had one, but there's been some some challenges with getting it used. Here is a recommended implementation process to think about. The first step is to form the team. The second step is to review optimal software options. The third step is to plan the implementation of the early alert. The fourth step is to implement the actual early alert. And the next step is for continuous evaluation and assessment. We're going to walk through these quickly. So the first part is to form the early alert team. So when you're forming the early alert team, we really think it's important to create a group of folks who can come together to talk about what early alert program we're going to have, how we're going to set it up, how we're going to implement it. But these team members must be equity minded. These are people who understand the role that systems have in creating disproportionate impact for certain student groups. These are people who will challenge common assumptions and deficit-minded perspectives about students. We really believe it's important, and we've covered this notion of equity-mindedness in a number of different webinars, so we're not going to go in depth here, but it's really important to have team members who are equity-minded. In addition, we need to have representatives from different areas, particularly from key entities such as task force that you may have on student success, equity, and matriculation. In fact, it might even be a component of that or a charge that is given to a specific student success, equity, or matriculation committee. In addition, whoever's on the team for designing and implementing this early alert, you need to have folks who are campus leaders who have buy-in, because getting buy-in for early alert is critical. Again, one of the most common things we hear is that we have an early alert, but no one uses it. And oftentimes that deals with buy-in. You also need to have representatives from key academic disciplines. You also need to have representatives from counseling and academic advising, from institutional research. And we also believe you cannot leave out the student voice in this process, especially when you're thinking about how do you design email communications that are going to go to students about this intervention. It's important to have students as part of this process to provide their input on what is an appropriate kind of message and appropriate kind of process that would actually result in an early alert that would produce positive outcomes for student success. The next step is to review optimal software options. So you can have an early alert team decide whether you're going to look at different types of software or if you're going to construct your own, build your own internal system. Either way, we believe is fine. We believe campuses simply just need to have an early alert. There are, of course, many popular softwares, Starfish being one of them, the more popular ones, but many other very good programs and many programs that are built into learning management systems such as Blackboard and Moodle, and we'll talk about that in a second here. So here's some things that you need to think about when you're constructing or an early alert system in terms of like how you're either going to select a system or how you're going to construct a build your own system. First thing is, do you need single level or multi-level access? A single level access occurs typically with learning management systems where a faculty member can make an alert, it can go to counseling or advising, and the student can be referred, and it happens at that faculty level. A multi-level approach is often done through different softwares. Now, we're not saying that learning management systems don't have this capability, but oftentimes software applications allow you to be able to have it where a faculty member might send an early alert, but there also might be a subsequent level where people can look at early alerts that are taking place across academic disciplines, across the campus, and in certain areas. So think about whether you need to have it as a single level or a multi-level in terms of the usability. Cost needs to be something that is taken into consideration. You can build your own program and have something that is very inexpensive, or you can go with a program that has all the bells and whistles. So cost needs to be something that is part of the conversation. Ease of use for the faculty members who are using it. customizability of the software in terms of what kind of messages are going to be sent, in terms of what are going to be the predictors that are going to be part of the early alert. Customizability is very key, particularly with gaining faculty buy-in. The human resources needed to operate and maintain a system. Some systems require low human resource capabilities, but you also have to think about, hey, are you going to need additional counseling or academic advisors to participate? Are you going to need early alert specialists? What kind of technological support is going to be needed to support a system? So these are things that you need to think about. And also, and this also relates back to customizability. If you have courses that are short-term courses, say a mini-semester course, or an 8-week course, or a full semester course, or if you're on the quarter system, how does the early alert need to differ by those different types of courses? That has to be part of the conversation. Once you, of course, go through this, which can be a labor-intensive process in and of itself in terms of selecting an option, whether you're going to use the software or construct a system of your own, you need to select that option and move forward. The next step is planning the implementation. We believe that it's important to name the system. We believe in positive student success-oriented systems. So we don't believe that you should have a system called Early Alert and the student has an email that comes from the Early Alert system, or an early intervention system, or academic concern system, or an academic progress system. Think about positive ways of framing the system itself so that when students get an alert, there's not an immediate level of anxiety that is raised. You need to establish common guidelines for the early alert process. This can occur either at the division level or campus level. It's going to depend upon the institution and the culture of the institution. Oftentimes, occurring at the division level is better because you're able to be more specific within disciplines, but you also may have a challenges in basically implementation if you have a system that is better designed for meta level access. So think about whether it needs to be division level or campus level. Determine whether you want to have a campus level or segmented implementation. So this is what that means. Maybe you want to have an implementation that focuses on, hey, we're going to do early alert, but we're only going to do it for basic skills and developmental education. Or we're going to start out with basic skills and developmental education or with the English department, and we're going to start scaling up. Or maybe you have a campus that really wants to implement it campus level. Either way is fine, but what needs to happen is you need to have those kind of conversations as part of this process, and that has to be part of the planning implementation. You need to modify institutional division level policies to support the use of early alert. This can be policies related to student academic progress. It can be policies related to student probation. It can also be policies related to faculty and faculty expectations. But there has to be a policy infrastructure to support early alert. Develop a phase-in process in terms of the implementation. And then you have to, and this is a key part that people oftentimes don't do, you have to have an intrusive, pervasive training process. Now, we believe in a process that may start out with a convocation where it's announced that this is going to take place, where it's high profile. You have campus leaders demonstrate and talking about the importance of the system, but also you have to have trainings that occur probably even at the division level or at the unit level that is really making sure that people know how to use the system, have their questions answered, and have the appropriate training. And oftentimes a single training won't be enough. Intrusive training has to take place because we can't tell you how many times we've gone to a campus where they have an early alert system, but only a very few number of faculty have been trained on how to do it. So you have to be intrusive with the training. And then you also have to, as part of this process of implementing the early alert, hire and assign or reassign advisors, counselors, and if your campus is going to use an early alert specialist or early alert specialists, you need to think about that as part of the program as well. Okay, next step is to engage in continuous evaluation of the system. So elicit feedback from students, faculty, and counselors and support specialists. Evaluate who's using the system, and just as importantly, who's not using the system. We also need to think about evaluation of changes in student outcomes over time. We need to look at how is this system benefiting our campus in terms of different types of students, looking at differences across discipline and academic area types. Now, here's a key point here. The purpose of assessment is to improve, not to prove. Meaning that when you're engaging in assessment, it's to help to improve the use, utility, and efficaciousness of the system, not to basically make judgments solely about whether the system is working or not. Constant improvement is the way that we need to be thinking about this assessment approach. Okay, now what I'm going to do is turn it over to one of our STAR doctoral students, Melissa Vang, who's going to talk to you a little bit about the pre-alert process, which is just as important.
Thank you, Dr. Wood. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. I will begin with the steps we identified that should take place before the early alert referral is submitted. So before referral is submitted, it is important that the pre-alert begins with a faculty member within the classroom setting. Faculty members should structure milestones into their course syllabus to monitor student performance in the class and to deter students from underperforming for the entire term. Oftentimes, students are unaware of that the college has an early alert system. So when they receive an email about being referred to early alert, they may have conflicting emotions about their academic abilities. Introducing early alert to students in the first class meeting of every class is very important. Faculty members should discuss the purpose and process of early alert so they understand that they are not being punished. As part of the pre-alert, faculty should be proactive about building relationships with students and be intrusive with their teaching strategies, particularly with men of color, to create a welcoming and caring environment for men of color to engage and participate more within the classroom. It would also be a great indicator to what steps the faculty should take in order to help foster their academic success. Next, listed on the slide, are signs that faculty members should be attentive to. For men of color, these indicators may stem from the previous slides that Dr. Wood mentioned about men of color who experience challenges with life stressors or experience barriers that influence their success in college. Attendance. If men of color or students continuously miss class, arriving late, or leaving class early more than 1 to 2 times, performing low on quizzes or small assignments, performing low on examinations, on one or more, since examinations are worth more, missing assignments or submission of incomplete assignments. And lastly, if men of color are disengaged in the classroom discussion, faculty should intervene and encourage them to participate. So as mentioned, common process for program early alert. This slide captures the common practices for program early alert. These practices are better than not having a system in place. So oftentimes, the student provides a form to their faculty. The faculty completes the form. It gets submitted to the program staff or counselor to meet with the student. And during the meeting, the student is provided with intrusive support and additional services. Next, we will review the common process for campus early alert. In this slide, we wanted to capture the common practices. As mentioned, the system is oftentimes broken or faculty members are not properly trained on the process. The process usually requires faculty member to submit a form. That form is usually found online or on the college website. The form is received from the counselor with a scheduled date and time to meet. During the meeting, the counselor referred the student to appropriate services. So this is our recommended early alert process. It represents the first step is after the faculty has initiated the pre-alert with the students, it should be communicated to the students, if possible, that the faculty will be referring the student to the early alert. Following that, faculty will submit the referral to the designated EA specialist. That specialist will then review the form and review the student records. The specialist will determine if the student is part of a program such as EOP or TRIO or a general student. If the student is part of the program, then the referral should go to their designated counselor. If a student is not in the A program, the EA specialist will contact the counselor and send over the student form and record. The counselor would then initiate contact with the student via email to set up a meeting time and date. The meeting between the student and the counselor should cover how the student is doing, how are their classes, are there any challenges in their academic experience that the college may help him with, and build a rapport and develop an actionable roadmap or pathway to hold the student accountable for taking the appropriate steps to improve the academic performance in their classes. After the meeting, the counselor should send notice to the faculty member that the meeting between the referred student has been made. This is an important step demonstrating that the process is a complete cycle and communicates that there is fluidity between the faculty member who referred the student and the counselor who initiated the meeting. This is not the only process that will work, but it is one way of developing an early alert process. Now I will hand it back to Dr. Wood.
Okay, and we're going to move quickly because we want to make sure that we get to our guest speaker. Just a couple of things to say to you real quick. As you think about implementing early alert, we think thinking about 18% of progress is when the alert should begin. So if you have a 16-week semester, you should be thinking about the alerts beginning in week 3. It's better, we believe, if the alert is integrated into a learning management system because then it removes the need for additional steps for faculty. Or if you have an integrated system with some other software, we think that that's better, but we do believe in integration. We have to have classes that have milestones that occur early on, so that has to be part of the conversation, which is going to be one sticking point. You want to avoid restricting the total number of early alerts that occur. We believe that you should elevate intrusive support based upon multiple early alerts, and that should be something that's codified in policy. The early alert, we believe, should not occur unless a faculty member has already engaged with the student first. Again, as Melissa has already pointed out, the pre-alert process includes the relationship between the student and the faculty. And when the alert goes out, we believe that you should leverage 2 methods of communication: phone, text, email, or other modes of communication. If the student is unresponsive, you have to think about how that's going to play into your system. We believe in an initial email, an elevated email that expresses concern, a potential hold email if you're going to use the hold process, which is really going to be campus specific. And then if you do end up putting a hold on the student's registration or record for non-responsiveness, note that in any subsequent follow-up that hold can be easily removed. And lastly, here's some things we'd like to tell you in terms of the email messages that go out to students. Please avoid the use of the word help. Remember, when we're talking about men and men of color, there's an apprehension to seek out help, so avoid using the word help in the email. Communicate institutional commitment to their success. Note your belief in their ability to succeed despite any challenges that there may be. Avoid mentioning negative consequences such as holds in those initial emails that go to students, but you can note that the meeting might be mandatory. And emphasize the desire to support students in attaining their life and career goals. This is important because we know that is one of the most commonly cited motivational factors for men of color. So with that, we're going to turn it over to our great colleague, Diva C. Ward, who is going to take it on from here.
I'd like to thank Dr. Wood and Dr. Harris for inviting me to share a little bit about our process and our successes that we've had through our early alert process and also through our inquiry process. So I'm going to start off sharing with you. Let's talk about my name first. I'm Diva Ward. I am the Director of Student Support at Kenyatta College in Redwood City. I am also a member of our STOP work group. That's the group that formed and impacted our early alert process, as well as an active member of our ACEs group, and you'll hear a little bit more about that later. So let me share a little bit about how our process started. Basically, it started with money. Our student equity and our basic skills committees combined to form ACEs, which is our academic committee for equity and success. Those 2 groups together came up with a professional development process that enabled us to embark on this journey of how we could better support men of color at our college. So basically, we had a retreat. At our retreat, we talked about student issues. We talked about the things that impacted students the most at our college. We wanted real life situations. We had a college-wide retreat, so the whole college was invited to participate. We gathered in one room. We looked at data that most impacted our students, and in particular, our men of color. We also looked at real case studies that faculty and administrators and staff had seen real life situations that students were experiencing at our college that reflected the issues that most impacted our students and their experience at our college. So you might be wondering what the data told us. Basically, there were lots of things that came through that process, but at the forefront was the disproportionately impacted students. And for the sake of this presentation, that represents our men of color in various forms. Our ESL students were also brought up as having issues that they brought to the college that were unique to them. Students on probation or pre-dismissal students. It exposed the need for a writing center at our college. Student issues outside of the classroom, that they were struggling with things that Dr. Wood shared with us earlier, those real life situations that come and impact their performance in the classroom. Our student athletes were a really big part of our conversation, as well as our evening students who didn't necessarily feel like they connected to the college, and also our basic skills students. So a little bit about our process. We embarked on an inquiry process where each group met and formed. The group that I worked with, as I mentioned earlier, was called STOP. That group asked ourselves the following questions. What was the situation we were trying to solve? What was our dream outcome? What were the activities that we're going to use to achieve that outcome? What are the outputs gained from the activities? And then what did we need to do to make those, once we came up with the activities, how would we make them successful? So our STOP group in particular, we wanted to stop the chain of events that led students to find themselves on probation. We wanted to directly impact our disproportionately impacted students, those students who are at high risk of failure. Some of our inputs was the early alert system. We wanted to focus on faculty using early alerts, counselors and retention specialists, similar to what Dr. Wood shared with us earlier about our process. So we wanted this to be a college-wide movement. We didn't want to limit it to our small group. We wanted to really be data-driven and focus on the men of color at our college, the students, athletes, the ones who were really not being successful, which is our disproportionately impacted students, and also our probationary students. So the activities that we decided to take on was our faculty utilization of early alert. We wanted to give the faculty some warning signs that they could look for that would help them to indicate when students were in trouble. And we hope that this would impact reducing the rates of students on probation, improving course success, improving faculty preparation, and also increased use of early alert. So this is kind of how we went about it. We identified what the warning signs were. This was our attempt to inform and prepare faculty to be able to look for indicators that students might be struggling in the class, because the likelihood is that they won't go to faculty, they won't go to any services in particular on campus to ask for assistance, to ask for support. So we wanted to arm and prepare faculty. The way that we did that is we identified these warning signs, and then we also identified action steps that faculty can take if they come across students who were struggling academic in the classroom. So it's from things to not showing up to class, to not having books or materials, adding late if they failed a quiz the first time, and then we wanted to give faculty some action steps. We didn't want them to just be informed, but we wanted them to feel prepared to address some of the issues that they were experiencing in the classroom. And we also wanted to heavily rely on the early alert system. This process allowed us to revamp our early alert process. We defined it, and I know we're not supposed to use the word help when we're talking about students, but we defined an early alert as a cry for help from faculty, and at the simultaneously a response to that cry for help through our early alert process. One of the counselors, and this is how we defined, we wanted to demystify what early alert was. A lot of the things that Dr. Wood mentioned earlier, we found to be exactly true. Lots of times faculty felt like it was a punishment for students to use early alert. They thought it was a reflection on their teaching. There were negative connotations to it, but really it was the faculty asking for help, and then our counselors and our retention specialists coming to the cry for faculty to help, starting contacts with students. So this is kind of how we informed faculty about what early alert was. It was this big mystery to faculty. They didn't know what it was. They didn't believe that there was action behind the submission of an early alert. So we wanted to create a myth buster of what early alert was. It's a short-term intervention. It's optional. It's faculty driven. It's a proactive request for counseling support, and it's a connection to services and to resources. What it isn't, it was never a punishment. It's not a reflection on your teaching. It's not an indication of failure on the faculty part, and it's a sign that a student is either on probation or they're in trouble. And then all of us, it's like a call to action for the college. It could be the learning center. It could be the counseling staff. So if you see about our process is once you submit an early alert, we wanted to shed some light on the process for faculty. Along with that, some of our observations, since we took this information on the road, we took it to our flex activities, we shared it with faculty, and in fact, we shared this information across the college. What we're finding is that, so we offered workshops for faculty about resources, about these warning signs, about the action steps. And since we've done that, we've offered 2 workshops at 2 different flex activities. And now we're finding that faculty are using early alert earlier in the semester. We're having much more success at reaching students. There's more action revolved around addressing the issues that our men of color are coming to the college with. There's dialogue about how to better support them. So it's at the center of our conversations. We're now looking at data to see if this is a good and positive interaction, for students, if it's good for faculty. And we're finding that yes, it is. More faculty are using it. The faculty that are now using it has expanded beyond English. Now math faculty are using it, and now it's crept into our physical sciences faculty who are also using it. Students, a lot of times, who have received early alerts are now coming to counseling. For some of them, it's the first time that they've actually come to counselors. And our retention specialists, so it's this whole circle of support that's been created for students who are struggling, who come to the college with these unique situations. And also our process has provided us with the opportunity to directly address the unique needs of every student, in particular our students of color. So our next move, we thought we want to highlight the student reality, but we also want to give this early alert process a chance, and we're going to create an early alert process for non-faculty is our next direction. And the 13 warning signs poster that you saw earlier, we'd also like to share that, make one of those for students so that they can identify when they may be struggling with academic troubles, and then of course steps to help them to be more successful in the classroom. I'd like to thank Dr. Wood and Dr. Harris, and thank all of you for allowing us to share part of our process with you all. We wish you continued success, and our goal is to better support and better prepare our faculty to work with students and men of color who are at risk of failure and at risk of not succeeding in the classroom and in our program. Thank you very much.
And we just want to thank you, Diva, for providing that just incredible information and overview of the work that's taking place at Kenyatta College. If you are interested in contacting Diva to get more information or more insights, her email is ward@smccd.edu. That's WARDD@smccd.edu. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're going to continue this conversation via the Twitter chat using the hashtag M2C3. If you have questions, comments, feedback, if you're in a room and you've been watching this webinar with a few other people or even by yourself, we really hope that you would take a picture and tweet it out or use the Instagram hashtag. That's the same hashtag M2C3. Hopefully this information has been value added. We think that the work that's taking place at Kenyatta College as well as at some other institutions is really exemplary, and we felt privileged to be able to feature them in today's webinar. We look forward to seeing you at the working group. That's again June 9th and 10th. This is our last webinar for this semester, and we will pick it back up in fall and we'll be releasing the fall schedule webinars later on. Again, thank you, and we look forward to connecting with you all again very soon.